Professor Calabresi, you just came to the European University Institute and presented your book, The Future of Law and Economics. We thank you very much for having been here. Now, in order to discuss this briefly, I have one question which I think is legitimate. As a graduate in economics and law, would you say that your life experience is the genesis of this new book?
Yes, of course it is. That's why I call it Essays in Reform and Recollection. Recollection because it goes back to the beginning, in some ways, of having learned economics from some remarkable people, James Tobin, Sir John Hicks, Lawrence Klein, all three Nobel laureates in economics, and a man named William Fellner, who is a great Viennese economist at Yale, who started me in economics, and then, when I went to law school, found that in the beginning class in torts, civil responsibility, all the questions that seemed to be unanswered could be looked at in some way from economics, and that would give some answers, but would also raise some other questions. And it's that I've been doing since. And now, after giving some answers, I'm raising some more questions.
So, one more question. How do you see economic theories exist in the confrontation of the rule of law?
Well, much of what happens in law can be explained in terms of economics. But there is much that economics can shed some light on, but doesn't really explain what happens in the world. The theory, economics, acts all too often as if it is the queen of the sciences and law is her handmaiden, to make a reference to theology and other things. And instead, what I think is that the two must work together so that each can help the other to understand better their own fields.
So does the lawyer make economic theory better for the world?
It does, because if you look at something which economic theory does not explain, it can be that it doesn't explain the world because the world is wrong, irrational, which is what economists tend to say when they look at the world and the world doesn't fit. But sometimes it is because the theory isn't sophisticated enough. The theory doesn't explain the world because the theory is a little simplistic, maybe easier for economists to do, but less useful. At that point, the lawyer can say to the economist, if you make these changes in your theory, it not only explains this, which we haven't been able to understand, but any number of other things you haven't thought of. A classic example of that was Ronald Coase in his article in the 1920s on the nature of the firm, in which he said, if markets were costless, the way economic theory at the time posited, there would be no firms. We do everything by contract. We wouldn't do anything by command as in a firm. But there are firms. Is it really impossible for economic theory to treat markets as costing and command as costing and then compare the two? Of course not. And once he had done that, he made economic theory far more interesting in any number of other fields. This is what I try to do in this book, to take some areas where economic theory does not explain the world, and then take the world of law and the lawyer-economist as a way of making welfare economics broader, deeper, more nuanced, so that it can explain not just what I'm talking about, but any number of other things.
The future of law and economics. Has it all been done?
If you just look again at economics as looking at law and discounting law when it is wrong, most of the work has been done. People have applied economics to one area of law and to another area of law and to another. But if instead you look at what law can say to economics as well, then just because you get an economic theory which is much more sophisticated, any number of things which previously you thought you dealt with should be dealt with again. So there turns out to be an awful lot to be done. In fact, that's why the book, while it is essays in reform and recollection, is also addressed to students and to the young. Because I'm 83 years old, and what comes out of a book are many, many things to be done which I don't have time to do, but which I'd love to see people do. And one of the very nice things of speaking at the European was to see so many students who were getting excited because they'll be the future.
So what do you tell them if so much has been done in law and economics? Would you go in which other new fields would you go today?
Law and economics is, after all, only one way of looking at the world of law and seeing if it makes sense or if it doesn't make sense. There are other ways of doing it. Many of these have also been done. Philosophy and law, history and law. My own feeling is that the area of law and something else which would teach us most today is law and anthropology. Because many things that I have seen that economics has not explained and that philosophy has not explained have roots in interpersonal relationships, but historical ones. So it isn't just sociology, but it's culture. And I think if I were starting out again today, that might be what I might do. Now, I don't want to be tied in because I do think there's so much still to be done for law and economics in the way that I would do it. So that I'd like to do that. But I think I might get a degree in anthropology as well and try to do both.
Professor Calabresi, thank you.
Thank you.